All right, I'm going to call to order this work session of the Laramie County Board of Commissioners. Today is Monday, October 7, 2019. I'm Tom Donnelly. I'm the chairman of the Board of Commissioners this year, joined by John Cafalas, Commissioner from District 1, and Steve Johnson, Commissioner from District 2. Linda Hoffman, our county manager, is with us at the control panel. This afternoon is our weekly work session with our Community Planning, Infrastructure, and Resources group. Laurie Kadrich is our director of that group. So, Director, would you like to kick us off?
Just very quickly, Commissioners. Good afternoon, and this afternoon I'm pleased to report that we'll have a different department from our service area doing a report to you today, the Department of Natural Resources, and Dalen's going to kick us off. We're looking at two topics potentially,
I didn't even see
the Horsetooth Visitor Safety Plan and an annual report.
I know. It's Tom. I'm sorry. Burt Reynolds is in attendance today, so I didn't notice. I didn't see him over there. Smokey and the Bandit. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah. Well, I'll go ahead and get going. So I'm Dalen Figgs, Director for Natural Resources. And the item we have this afternoon, as you can see on the screen, is the Horsetooth Visitor Safety Plan. And this plan stems from the 2017 master plan at the Reservoir Parks, where it cites visitor satisfaction with visitor safety and their experience at a 4.5 out of 5. And from that time, we've been focused on making sure that we maintain that visitor safety record and making it a safe place for our residents to go. Well, as you know, our visitation is also increasing, so maintaining this level of visitor safety in light of this expanding use base is a challenge. And our staff have worked diligently with the partners you see here in the room, which Mark and Ken will introduce here in a few minutes, to begin the process of putting together a visitor safety plan. And this is a very collaborative, very partnership-driven approach to working not just on the properties that we manage, but in the surrounding landscape and roads to ensure visitor safety. Today, we really just wanted to introduce the topic to the commissioners with the idea of bringing the plan back at the end of the year for whatever the appropriate level of approval is. We're not quite sure what that looks like yet. But today, really seeking your input and guidance on the document and making sure we capture your thoughts as we go through this process. Ken Brink will also provide, if you would like to see, our annual report on the activities of our ranger staff and the summation of that. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark Coughlin and Ken Brink to introduce our guests. They'll do a presentation, and we certainly will be here for any questions you may have at that time.
Okay, I'm Mark Coughlin with Laramie County Natural Resources. We have a lot of our partners here today. It's quite a few, because as we go through this project, you'll understand the size and scope of kind of what we're working with. So, real quick, with us we have Sheriff Smith and Under Sheriff John Monago is with us today. Bobby Mall from the Sheriff's Department, Rob Marone from Colorado State Patrol, Jim Pietrangelo from Poudre Fire Authority, Jim Struble with Northern Water, Howard Bailey and Brian Cornell with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, and one of his partners as well, Bernie Lodge as well, is with us today, kind of representing our partnership today.
Great.
Go ahead. All right, with that, we'll go right into the plan. As Dalen said, I'll show you a slide here just to keep some things in some context. The area that we're talking about basically today is this east side of Horsetooth Reservoir. We'll talk about the reservoir in general and the explosion of population and visitors in our area. Just to give you an example, Horsetooth Reservoir is the third busiest reservoir in the state of Colorado. Chatfield is number 2 and Pueblo is number 1. You know, the main recreation we have is boating, obviously because of the reservoir, and camping are two primary, along with day use. And day use we'll talk about, that goes from everything from stand-up paddleboarding, rock climbing, to mountain biking, to swimming. It's probably our largest sector of growth right now is our day use area. And also we do a lot of special events. The photo up there is a CAST event, which we've done for 20 plus years. It's called Catch a Special Thrill. It's a national organization. We take disabled children out for a day of fishing, where we get all the local bass clubs and some other folks to donate their boats. They take kids out that's severely disabled, wheelchairs and otherwise, out for a day of fishing. We also have a large events like, the U.S. Pro Cycling Challenge came through. We host that event. We have several. I think as far as an entity besides the ranch, we probably host the most special events out of any organization in the county, so we just kind of keep that in context. So we're really here to talk about is our visitor numbers and how they've changed from 2005 to 2018. It's kind of staggering when I look at that. If you look at Horsetooth Reservoir in general, 2005 was about 550,000 visitors. Last year in 2018, we surveyed, we had 900,000 visitors. If you add in Horsetooth Mountain Park, which is right next door, that visitation goes up to 1.1 million people a year visit our areas. Again, it's one of the largest recreation areas in the state of Colorado, right here in our county. What we're really talking about today is like the east side of Horsetooth Reservoir. Those are, and keep in mind when I talk about that, I talk about 3 day use areas that are not open at night. They're just day use areas. Back in 2005, as you can see, we had 143,000 visitors. Last year, 2018, we had 411,000 visitors in 3 day use areas. That's by far our largest growth in our population, in our department wide, out of all of our properties. Horsetooth is by far our busiest property in our system. Out of the 60-some thousand acres that we oversee, Horsetooth reservoirs are by large, by far our biggest one. You know, I talked to engineering and Bill Gleeforce to get some numbers, keep this in perspective. We talked about this road counter data and why this is important. If you look there, just when we see that weekday number, that's average daily. That's the average daily vehicles going by the road. So on County Road 23, it's pretty much County Road 23 at 42C where the road comes up from the old Hughes Stadium. So just on the east side of the reservoir, in 2009, there was 1,100 daily trips on a weekday. In 2017, we got 2,900. They update these counts every year. They have road counters out now, so we'll get that 2019 data here at the end of the year to help us kind of help keep track of this as well. The weekend data went from 2,000 vehicle trips to 3,300. I won't read all this. Now, 38E data, which goes around the south of the reservoir, that is basically from Spring Canyon Dam all the way around the end of the reservoir. So why these are important is the impact to our resources that we have and our staffing. Things that we've seen come up because of this use is in the rise of vandalism. You guys see emails about the rise in keeping our facilities out. The number of suicide attempts that we see have gone up quite a bit. The traffic accidents, it's kind of interesting when I talked to Captain Marone back in March about some of these problems we have and how they might be able to help. The State Patrol identified Horsetooth Reservoir as one of their hot zones for the serious and critical traffic accidents. So they were already working on a plan on how could they better improve safety, public safety up there. I talked to Battalion Chief Peter Angelo about this as well, and he has a map as well that shows all the hot zones in the county and kind of in their district. And they identified Horsetooth as a hot zone as well. And they specifically increased their training, their level of training for water rescues and mountain rescues and backcountry stuff. They've increased their training in the last 5 or 6 years just to accommodate some of these issues that we're having. So that's why you see this big group of people here today, just because that shared interest in public safety. Also, what we see is the rise of drug use and other criminal activity along the east side of our reservoirs. You know, as Director Figg said, we're in danger of that rating, that 4.5 out of 5 rating of our visitor satisfaction or visitor safety. We're in danger now of losing that, and we kind of see that coming. And this is not unique just to us. If you go to national parks or you go to other parks around the country, they're all facing the same challenges. So we know this is coming. We know it's becoming a bigger problem. We're just here to kind of how do we better get ahead of that. You know, what's kind of interesting is that, you know, we saw that visitation number of 900,000. We'll call it 1.1 million for that area. Horsetooth Reservoir is really designed to host about 500,000 people, not 900,000 people. That's what our infrastructure is really based upon. Number of campsites, number of boat trailer parking spots, all that. We're really based on maybe that 500,000 number is what we're really designed to do. So the question is, how do we become better at getting ahead of some of these issues? You know, we're fairly limited staff. I have 3 FTE rangers. It's kind of funny between that 2005 number and this 2018 numbers. I've literally got 1 more full-time ranger and 1 more full-time maintenance staff. So we almost double our visitation, and I have 2 more full-time staff to kind of help deal with those. I have 12 seasonal rangers. They're basically college kids, summer job, that help out. They run our boat patrol program. They run our night patrol. Those about 12 individuals help us out greatly to kind of manage that facilities, you know, the best we can. I have about 3 full-time maintenance staff and about 4 seasonal staff to kind of help with that. Our rangers are multi-purpose staff where they provide education. They walk the campgrounds. They talk to folks. They give information on fishing, camping, all that stuff you would think a normal traditional ranger would do. Unfortunately, now with the visitation we have, they spend a lot of their time controlling traffic, working parking lots, responding to criminal activity, emergency medical conditions, stuff like that. That's what they spend their time doing. You know, but with all that being said, you know, our department's been around since 1954, and I always like to tell this story because that's 6 years before state parks started. They started in 1959. So we understand these problems. We're immersed in the day-to-day operation of these parks and open spaces. We understand what this problem is. That's why we're reaching out to our partners to kind of help us out to fill those gaps. That we can't be everywhere at once, but how do we work as a community to kind of better address all these problems? And so we understand what's going on. So we understand what this problem is. We kind of know how to get to the point. We're just kind of here, just meet with you guys to kind of just make sure that we provide that information. I had a very wise man once tell me a couple years ago, the worst thing about being a park ranger is that we're far too humble of an occupation, that we're not good about telling our story about the problems we have because we think we can handle everything. And so, I think that's law enforcement in general. So we're trying to figure out, hey, how can we better spread that word to you folks to kind of let you all know kind of what's going on, kind of the challenges we face, and how can we get better about doing this. These numbers are pretty high now, but I look 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, and I see the amount of people that come to this area. If we don't kind of get, some kind of good plan together to solve these problems, it's only get worse, I think, as well. So that's why we have all these partnerships. Like I said, we don't have enough staff in-house to solve all these problems by ourselves, and that's why this list up here is so extensive. Working with, I met with Bill Gleeforce about a month ago from engineering to add 2 more crosswalks around our busy areas of parks and day use areas, to work with signage, have better speed control around our parks, to have some other public safety, things in place to kind of help with this. So really this is kind of a targeted approach to how we want to do some of the stuff. And, this plan is still developing. We hope to have this plan done by the end of the year. But some things we're coming up with now is how could we use some targeted enforcement as far as, traffic control. We've seen a rise in the area of serious and fatal crashes. We've seen suicide rates go up. We've seen a lot our recurrences of medical, whether it's, car accidents or people falling during climate accidents or get bit by rattlesnakes, whatever it may be. How do we get better trained together? How do we better kind of fill those gaps when we see those high use times? How do we get better about doing that? Northern Colorado, for example, has the use of, they have cameras on all the dams. They have 2 cameras on each dam at Horsetooth, which are live feed cameras we can pull data on. So we had this, about 3 weeks ago, we had 4 different suicide events in 9 days. And one of those things we used to help solve that problem was this guy faked his own death on a suicide attempt. We were able to grab some cameras from Northern Water that has 24-hour feed cameras. So we're trying to figure out, hey, how can we get better with cameras and things like that about, kind of working on some of these approaches. So some of the kind of adaptive responses that we've kind of figured out that we want to go into is how do we harden some of these facilities. Like I said before, we're designed to accommodate about 500,000 people. We're getting about 1 million. We just put in, for example, for a FLAP grant. It's a federal land access program grant. It's for $10 million. That would help us, really harden some of these facilities, our parking, our campgrounds, our parking areas, some of these other structures to kind of harden them. Use of technology we talked about as far as getting cameras on board. There's also the sheriff's department has been very kind and let us use these mobile trailers that have these live feed cameras, multiple cameras to help us kind of work through some of these incidents, kind of better track what's going on out in our areas. We have some attractive nuisances on the east side of Horsetooth Reservoir. This picture here, the graffiti, is the traditional cave area up at Rotary Park, we'll call it. We've been talking to the Bureau of Reclamation about this in Northern Water, and maybe the best thing to do if we're smart is just to close that area and maybe drop that cave in place. Use some low impact explosive and really just drop that cave in place to kind of get rid of that attractive nuisance. We used to have our highest incidence of cliff diving, which is a big deal for us. Takes a lot of our time, caused a lot of injuries. Was on the east side of Horsetooth Reservoir. We had a parking lot right outside of it on the south end of Soldier Canyon Dam. What we did was we just got rid of that parking lot, and we got rid of 99% of the cliff diving problems on that property. So we're getting better about how do we design features and how, you guys heard about obviously the spike strips that we have on the east side. We started that with the ANS program earlier this year. It's worked successfully. I think those spike strips have a lot of value, just not to keep people out. I think, in my opinion, my professional opinion, it saves lives. A good example was the first week we had the spike strips up down at South Bay. We had a suicidal young man in his 20s drive through there, blow all 4 tires out of his vehicle. Sheriff's Department was out looking for him. He called in, had a suicide note. His mom was looking for him. We blew all 4 tires on his vehicle. He literally went like 50 yards and had to stop. We talked to him afterwards the next morning. We found him. He was thinking about either driving his vehicle into the reservoir or going back out on the county roads, and he was severely influenced by drugs and alcohol. So I think some of these things, keeping people out of these desirable areas for crime, whether it's the county drug task force has also identified this as some areas where drug deals go down by larger operations. You know, if we could keep that control down at night, you know, how can we get rid of some of these attractive nuisances? You know, we have in the county a serious public health issue as far as suicide events. I told you we had 4 events in 9 days. You know, is there a way to get some signage, some information out there that directs people that are in crisis and have something where they can maybe call? You know, maybe that might perhaps help with some of those folks who are kind of in that crisis. So we're kind of working through all those projects. You know, hopefully from the manager's point of view, hopefully we have some education, some media out there as well to kind of help alert the folks. You know, some of the best folks we have out there are visitors who are calling us and saying, look, someone is this lady called us about a month and a half ago and said, look, these kids are painting the cave with spray paint and cans. If you don't get up here, I'm going to take care of this myself. Like, whoa, settle down. People are really passionate about the outdoors, right? And so they're more than happy to help us. If we had a hotline up there, that people had a way to contact us, almost like a neighborhood watch program, you know, for example, how could we better get the citizens involved as well to help us through some of these problems? So I'll be honest with you, I'm one guy. Right, I'm one guy and I got a limited staff. That's why we have all these partners here behind us to help us out solve these problems. But really, what we need is your input. In my opinion, the most important people in the room are elected officials who understand this problem, kind of support what we're doing, and give us that support to realizing what's going on, understand our plan, understand what we're trying to do, and how do we do that? Because as a park manager, you know, I'm a park ranger at heart. You know, my plan is I put this photo up here with this nice family. That's our view of the parks, right? Nice people come to our parks. When I look back at the folks behind me, like Bobby Mall, when I see Bobby most of the time, it's his wife and 3 kids are up there wakeboarding. You know, when I see Howard Bailey, you know, he's up at our reservoirs camping. I mean, that's really as a ranger. That's what we're trying to do. How do we provide this exceptional experience in Laramie County for recreational and still kind of protect that safety and protect that value? So that's kind of, at the end of the day, I think that's where we're trying to go with this plan.
All right. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate Mark's work on this. He's been assigned a project for the whole year 2019 to continue working on this and to work with partners. We, in all honesty, as Mark said, we've been reacting many times year after year to the increased visitation and to the increased seriousness of the incidents. I think as a supervisor, our patrol staff gets into calls up there, and I sit home at night and worry about them. There's nights I've had my pack set radio on all night, listening to them, working with the sheriff's department, trying to find somebody that we already know is a violent offender or something somewhere out on the park. So this year for me, the thought was, let's try to be as proactive as we can, and let's try to reach out to our partners and say, you know, there's no way we can be all things to all people managing those park areas. On the open space, you know, a lot of the nature of the work is educational, it's rescues, but these big regional reservoir parks we have are very much, as Mark mentioned, on the magnitude and level of use as some of the busier state parks in Colorado. So this is what's really on my heart thinking about this. You all know we have more and more of these serious calls. Mark mentions these 4 suicides, and literally one of our rangers kept a young lady from jumping off the cliffs at Rotary Park. 2 days later, we had a young man who was becoming very violent with his mom, broke all the windows out of her car, ran across the road on Fort Collins land, and set himself on fire. So, I mean, these are not things working in my career as a ranger that I'm used to hearing going on day to day, but these are kind of some of the challenges that our people are facing. And so our thought with this plan is, let's be proactive. Let's not try to solve it on our own. Let's work with our partners. I had a great follow-up conversation with Commissioner Johnson about this maybe a month ago. And I think it really came up because of the use of the spike strip on the east side there. And I'll be honest with you, you know, if we do end up getting into the statistics, one of the things that's caused a big increase in the number of people detained and arrested by our rangers is the fact that we're trying to physically close those parking lots out at night now. Because for years we used automated gates, and people just have figured out they can push their car against that gate with a certain amount of pressure and just break the drive motor off of it, and every time they do that, it costs us a lot of money. So we've been hard locking the gates right now without the use of the road strip, and because of that, it puts us directly in contact with everybody for a number of hours pretty much every night of the year. Very, very expensive for us, takes us away from other important priorities. And so that's one of the reasons we've seen our arrests go up. We have a tremendous number of people leaving these day use areas that are either intoxicated or increasingly under the influence of various types of drugs. So that's why we came today. We would like to get input from you. Mark has not finished the report. Any feedback we get from you or interaction between all of you and our partners is going to be key to our ability to have a good plan. And I think when Dalen started out and said, you know, we very much value that 4.5 out of 5-star rating on safety and cleanliness that we got. We know we got a 2 stars on crowding, but, you know, we've only got so many areas and we got more and more people that want to be out there. We take it as a great compliment that we hear from people all the time that when they're in there, they feel safe and they didn't realize there's a problem. We consider that a huge compliment because the number of things that are going on at night, Sheriff's Department has loaned us their intelligence gathering trailer, and we put it in those parking lots. And sure, you see a lot of funny things, but you also see a lot of tragic things in those parking lots at night. So anything we can do to contain these problems in that area and not have them spread throughout our county park system, that's our interest. So we wanted to leave a lot of the time so there could be time for questions or comments. One of the things, I will mention one more thing, I apologize, I'll mention one more thing, just we've had a lot of conversation about the county roads, and we have gone and followed up quite a bit with both the State Patrol and the Sheriff's Department about that. And it is true that it's County Road 3080 that we see in the stats, or it's County Road 23, but for our visitors, that's our park road. It's the only way for them to get from one part to the park to another park, to buy their permits, to go out and recreate, get to the shower house, back to their campsite. So, you know, when you think about what's going on those roads, there's a lot of neighbors driving through with local residents. There's people in large RVs. There's people dragging boats. There's people in bicycles going for a hike down the side of the road. 4th of July, we have them parked all the way down the road on both sides, hundreds of cars to watch the fireworks down in town. And, you know, one of the focal points of this plan will be how can we most effectively, with working together, address keeping our roads safe for all those different divergent interests. So I think after that, we'll take questions unless you have something to add.
No.
So maybe before we do that, Sheriff, I was going to ask you if you wanted to come up and say if there's anything you'd like to say.
This one's on.
You would willingly give a microphone to the
Usually,
sheriff?
and I know there usually is. Some,
Shame on you. No, I just,
the meeting at 3. So.
oh, yeah, we'll get it within an hour. I'm good. No, I just, a few things to share. Having been with the agency for 30 years, we've gone through a lot of iterations on how public safety was addressed. Where we're at today with the county park rangers that have deputy sheriff commissions because of that state certification, I think has got us to a real sweet spot. And I say that because I see how other counties have done this, and it's not unusual for the sheriff to have a parks component that actually goes out and works the parks. And you'll be surprised to hear that's not an area I want to get into. Honestly, I've seen it work a lot better because my folks are enforcement folks. They're doing community policing, but they're not the outdoors naturalist type. They're not working on guest services that our county park rangers do. And I just want to reiterate that we've worked very closely with your park rangers to make sure that how that hiring process works, the training process, and then the policies and procedures, the expectations for what things park rangers should be handling on enforcement and what things should transition over to our staff, be it the patrol staff or the investigation staff. We've got a very smooth flow. I think it's one of those that sets a model in the state. And what I really like to see, not simply as your sheriff, but as a visitor to the parks, is the fact these folks are really putting a lot of emphasis on that guest services and guest experience. That you know, the frustrating part is to see with the volume that goes on. I know there is a lot that really has moved them more into their enforcement role, but I know they do a tremendous job when I'm out there and see them, and they're engaging with folks because the majority of what they're doing is still answering questions, helping people to understand and appreciate and protect the parks along with the public safety part. So from my perspective, that partnership has worked very well. Tremendously professional staff that are out there. And again, we want to make sure that the way this is working out works not only for our folks, but for you guys as well. in how those services are being delivered. So I just want to share, that's an important piece. And again, I would reiterate, I had not seen the specific road counts, but I'm not surprised. I think we all know that Centennial Drive up there is just tremendous. We all love to go up there and enjoy that, and it does make it a dangerous place. I've got a traffic unit of 4 deputies to cover the whole county, and that's over 1,000 miles of road, not even counting all the residential roads that are out there. So when we have that much traffic, a large percentage is there because of the parks. It's helpful to us that I can get out and put deputies into the residential neighborhoods to work those neighborhood traffic complaints, knowing that as they're working the roads up there, they can help us on the safety components, because as was brought out, I certainly know that the traffic safety is a big issue and a lot of concerns up there. So while I know they're always tweaking the plan, and as the parks and natural lands go out further and further, that's an even bigger challenge. But I'm here to articulate my support and appreciation for where they've gone and kind of where the planning continues to go.
Questions, Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Sheriff. I have a couple of questions on the law enforcement side of things.
Yes.
First of all, and I think you alluded to this, what is the capacity of the Sheriff's Office to be patrolling 23E? Are there patrol vehicles up there every so often, or is it based on responding to an issue, or how does that work?
Good question, Commissioner. We actually have a district that covers kind of between Fort Collins and Loveland, but with staffing, we don't often have somebody up there, or they're tied up on a lot of the calls down here, a lot of the stuff just right on the edges of the city. So we don't have a lot of presence up there. We're kind of running around. We hit the other side of the reservoir, clear back up to Stowe Prairie. So the deputies are working a broad area. So the patrolling, we do what we can, but the presence doesn't match the volume of traffic that's up there.
So there is patrolling, but it's probably somewhat sporadic. And
It's just, yeah, it's spread over, a tremendously large area, obviously.
and Sarah, what is the interaction with your office and the State Patrol? Since it's county roads, do they patrol as well, or they respond to accidents? Because I know when there was an accident up on Red Feather Lakes Road last week, State Patrol was up there, and certainly one of your deputies.
Yeah, no, I'll let Captain Marone address if you have more specifics, but in general, in the unincorporated areas of Larimer County, State Patrol works motor vehicle accidents. We'll do some of the minor ones upon their request when troopers aren't available. But as far as the enforcement, our general agreement, since the Sheriff's Office in the county picked up a bigger push in traffic enforcement about 2 decades ago, was we would try to primarily handle county roads and then the residential roads, freeing up State Patrol for state highways, U.S. highways, and the interstate. It doesn't mean that they're not hitting that area, but I'd sort of let the captain address where his staffing is their ability to be up there. But I think I'm spread thin. I've got nothing on State Patrol when it comes to spread thin. So we're the ones primarily, and part of it's through the rangers to do enforcement on those county roads up there.
Just, if I may, one last question, and then perhaps the captain would like to speak with us. And that is on the illegal drug use. How do we know about that? Are people calling up and complaining? Are law enforcement or rangers coming upon people engaged in that activity? How do we know about those kinds of things?
I'm going to actually ask the parks to talk. It comes all ways, but more specifically what's going on in the park, I think maybe Mark or Ken might be best to address what you guys are running into up there.
I can't speak in specific cases. I will tell you, closing the gates at night, we're running into a lot of people that seem obviously impaired when they're trying to get in their vehicles and leave the area. And we'll use roadsides to see what that level of impairment might be. And there'll be impairment, but we do carry a portable breath tester. And so sometimes if that's 0 and the person seems very impaired, we might suspect that there's drug impairment. Later on, when tests come back, we're finding more and more commonly that there is in fact drug impairment. But that's one of the ways. But Mark, do you have more specific?
Yeah, like Ken mentioned, I think what we're seeing more of is that cocktail between people who are arrested for drinking and driving. It's just not alcohol. We're seeing a higher incidence of drugs involved as well. We find people up in the parking lots, they're not only drinking alcohol, but they're smoking marijuana, or it's the rise in harder drugs are coming back. Meth, not so much, but heroin, we're seeing a higher rise in cases for heroin incidents. Maybe the captain might be able to give some information about what they're seeing as well as far as that mix of drugs. Since the legalization of marijuana, we've seen a lot more people smoking openly in public, which is prohibited, and it seems like we're seeing a lot more youth now that'll have will have marijuana on them as well. So we're seeing that rise in drugs as well in the last probably 5 years, I would say. We've seen that rise.
And I would just add, outside of the parks, if you look at the DA's numbers, felony drug filings in this county are up almost 400% in about a 5-year period. So what you're seeing up there is very consistent with the problems everywhere. I think the reminder is parks are never in, whether it's a county park, a state park, or a federal park, they're not insulated from the problems that surround them. So I think what they're experiencing up there just mirrors what we're seeing in society.
Well, I must say, this is a bit of an eye-opener because I hearken back in the days when things were simpler.
The good old days.
Hey, how are you?
Great, sir. How are you?
Great. Why don't you introduce yourself, sir?
I'm Rob Marone. I'm the captain with CSP in Laramie County.
Welcome, Captain.
Thank you.
Are your light on in your mic?
It is.
Okay, great.
So I think the sheriff did a great job outlining what our problem is with staffing. We roughly have 4 troopers, if this is a good staff day, to cover Laramie County. Primarily, we're focused on the state highways, but everybody knows this county has several state highways that are busy, to include I-25. So our strategy is, our number one goal is preventing that serious crash, that serious injury or fatal crash. And so our strategy with that is we have 4 beats that are staffed by the 4 troopers, and within these beats we have what we call hot zones. And these are your highest probability area zones to create visibility and strict enforcement in an effort to reduce those crashes that I talked about. The approach we've taken is we recognize that a trooper has about 20% of their day that they can actually commit to something that's not going to be given to them. So the whirlwind, so to speak, the 80% of the day is going to be a crash response or something that's going to take them away from their proactive approach. So with these 5 hot zones that we've identified, it is our goal to hold to that 20% time frame that the trooper has to be focused in one of those 5 zones to prevent these crashes that we're talking about. And this is a unique area because the 4 beats I talked about, all 4 of them have state highways and federal highways. This area is called Area 3. It incorporates the Horsetooth area. It is the only beat that we have responsibility for that has such a large amount of county roadways that account for our response and our investigation. So we have sort of shifted gears on the focus of the state highways and more towards the county roads in this particular area that we're talking about.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to ask the sheriff, so, I mean, it seems like where we're going is there's not enough, the amount of presence hasn't kept pace with the use, the number of trips on the road, the types of incidents we're seeing. And one of the things I visited with Ken was a concern that I had was it seems like our park rangers a lot of times are being diverted from the park to doing traffic out on the county roads and, not spending as much time in the park, which I have some concerns about. So who do you think is the most appropriate entity to respond in a staffing situation to meet the demand, or is that necessary, or is that needed? It seems like it is to me. You're always shorthanded, right? Who should staff up to provide the type of enforcement that's needed in this area?
Good question, Commissioner. When I look at what we're mainly talking about is County Road 3080 and 23 or Centennial, the fact that the Rangers, that's their zone, that's where they're at, and I believe as Mark and Ken addressed, they're going from location to location that are park facilities there, and that's the road to come through. From my perspective, the dual role, they're checking their locations, they're checking on the safety, they're working with visitors, and are the ones to patrol the road. For me, that would mean pulling them from a neighborhood somewhere, somewhere else in the county to get up there, a lot more drive time to spend it. Not to say that my traffic folks aren't up there, I know you've seen him up working those areas up through there, but yeah.
I mean, I
yes,
see
yes,
so much.
yes, you have, Commissioner.
This morning, I saw the state patrol up there at 9:30, and I see the Rangers stopping people on the road out by the old stadium, and I see you guys up there doing speed enforcement on a hill that's impossible to go 35 miles an hour on. So when I hear strict enforcement, my neighbors are, seeing 3 different law enforcement entities stopping them for going more than 35 miles an hour down a 45-degree hill. I'm a little bit concerned about that, but obviously there's a lot of criminal activity up there that we don't want in our neighborhood, so.
Yeah, again, when I look at the staff, I look at the efficiency for the public. The enforcement folks that are the closest by, I think, are the most appropriate use. And I can have 7 people in different districts working in the county, plus traffic folks, where State Patrol is lucky to have 4, and I'd be surprised if at least 2 of those aren't somehow tied up with the interstate. So for them, I know they do get out there, but I know it's most difficult. It's challenging for us to place somebody up there. As far as how the enforcement goes, discretion is always a very important part. We look at probably about a quarter of our traffic stops or less, and Lieutenant Mall can address the specific, but the percentage that end in a citation, it's what enforcement's necessary. I think one of the challenges you run into up there, you being a resident that travels all the time, the road a little better. We get a lot of folks that don't. We get motorcycles that go extremely high rates, but when they're making the contacts up there, to my knowledge, they're using pretty reasonable discretion, because the thing is, that vehicle it's going 5 or 10 over, usually 10 over or more, that's contacted may also be that one that happens to be impaired, may have other violations, other issues going on. So certainly it's appropriate to make those contacts. One of the things I always offer is that certainly it's county engineering and roads that set the limits. We're not the ones to best determine what they are. But one of the things that does make it difficult up there is I think they're not set simply for what it is on 9 o'clock on a Monday for traffic, but they're set for what it is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday with the volume. And that's, if there's anything that impresses me about that road, and Mark hit it, it's the runners combined with the bike riders and the motorcyclists, the regular cars, and then the boats and the travel trailers come. So I think part of that is part of the deer, absolutely.
They're crazy. That's like a big squirrel.
I want to bring DOW in here and answer some questions, why they can't control those deer. But I hope that gives you a little better perspective. Mine, the way we've made the agreement with county parks is, obviously they're handling everything inside the official part of the parks. On the adjacent, they're fairly normally running across that. We have a list of crimes they typically handle. If it goes beyond that, they call my office and simply say, hey, what do you want done? Do you want us to handle it, or do you want to handle it? Beyond that, as they're traveling, especially all these remote areas that we have, the open lands now, the rangers will routinely call us. If they see something very dangerous happening in front of them, those that are completely post-certified deputy sheriffs will handle it as they would anywhere else. If there's something else going on outside of the park, the protocol is they'll call my supervisor on duty and say, Parks unit, and give their name or their number. I'm at this location. Would you like me to respond and help, and wait to see if they get approval? So they become a force multiplier for us at being able to step out and be that immediate person for public safety. And I think a lot of that would probably go to what Poudre Fire is dealing with as well, where Parks is stepping into that fire rescue capability a little as well. But
they've stopped some incidents that could have gotten really out of hand. I mean, even during the last fire.
Yeah.
There was a little one that started near the park. But I guess I'm wondering is if we need extra people, who's best to do it? Is it one of your deputies? Is it additional rangers are needed? Or
dollar for dollar, my money goes on park rangers up in that area, because while it may not technically be inside of the park, it's all congruent to the roads that surround the park. They're up there. It makes the most sense with how the dollars are being spent.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the sheriff brings up a really good point. We have very strict rules as far as we engage in say, traffic enforcement. We don't send the county roads to do radar enforcement. We don't do that. All the vehicles and the rangers are stopping are either doing 15 or 20 miles over the speed limit. They're severely weaving within the range, their lane. They're constant, very visible public safety. That's rules of engagement our guys have. So they're not running traffic, so to speak. It's just they're going down the road and get some drunks coming out and putting them in a ditch. you know, or they're going 20 miles over the speed limit, and they're endangering the runners, the bicycles. Grandpa Bert with his 1974 Winnebago pulling a pontoon boat. That's what we're worried about. And so then they make those stops when it's an absolute public safety risk, and that's a kind of rules of engagement we have with the sheriff's
Yeah,
department.
and I think we all want that, for sure.
Yeah,
A
and
couple other things on the plan that I would be interested about. I mean, it seems to me that it would be really ideal if we could create some bike lanes that were decent and off that road. And that road has some topographical limitations that make that impossible in some places, but in other places, you know, because that's that Masonville Loop. I mean, there's just so many people that use that road, and we just did a lot of resurfacing work on that road, and I wish we had known about that ahead of time and could have talked with engineering about if there's any road, you know, in the county that could use some different type of bike structures, it would be that one, and maybe the Carter Lake Road. That would be ideal, I think. And you mentioned crosswalks. Do you know, have those happened, or are you looking at locations for those?
So engineering and road and bridge are in the process now adding those crosswalks.
Okay.
One will be right from the South Bay campground to the store right across the
That's
street.
what I was going to suggest, because people run across that road with trying to carry a paddleboard, you know, and the way that is both hills come right down into that little circle or that little U-turn area. So that would be a great place for some crosswalks, and I don't know how you do the signage there, but
They're adding 2 signs and a crosswalk, and that should be done.
are they the
this month.
flashing yellow lights, or is it just a static sign?
You know, they want to start with the static signs and the
See if that
crosswalk. And if
helps.
we need to, they offer to do the flashing signs as well. It's interesting you mentioned the bike lanes, because we spent a tremendous amount of time during this last master plan process. You might have realized we met with the mountain bike community several times. We looked at an engaging plan, several different plans. One is kind of coming up over the hill from Spring Canyon Dam to get people off that canyon road from JJ's up to the top, maybe come through a natural area over the dam. We met with the Bureau and we met with Northern Water about that process. We're out there trying to figure out the best way to do that. We looked at doing a bike lane on Canyon Road 38E from Spring Canyon Dam down to South Bay. Could we put a bike lane on the water side? As you know, that drops off steeply. All this stuff is possible, but it just became
Expensive, yeah.
it became cost prohibitive, and it kind of dropped out of the plan just for pure cost. But we gave a lot of thought to that. Not those. That information is going to die on the vine, but I think that's something to look at. We are developing in this plan from Inlet Bay to South Bay, doing a trail to get the people off the mountain bikers off the canyon road. Where they can take a trail from South Bay over to Inlet Bay, give them a little more topography, and get some of that traffic off the road. But it is so steep and narrow through there.
And one thing I did want to follow up with Commissioner Johnson is your question about staffing. One of the things we want to look at in this plan is bringing in technology that can free up our staff to do other things. So we've talked about the trailer in the parking lot with the cameras and devices like that. The tire strips to keep our staff from having to clear parking lots at night. I mean, those type of technologies can be employed, reducing our staff needs. So we may be able to, through efficiencies, gain staffing that can work on more typical ranger-related duties.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that it's that simple. I mean,
It's
obviously,
a-
the partnerships, the leveraging of the resources is where it's at. But, I mean, that can only go so far, and at some point in the future, with the growth in our county, somebody's going to need more staffing in the area. They just are.
Absolutely.
But I support all those other efforts that you're doing. They make a
Yeah.
lot of sense, and they have a lot of rationale. It just takes people a while to get used to them.
It does. And it
Most parts of the country, heck, people in California can figure out how to not drive over spike strips. I think our people are just as smart here.
I think so.
We just don't see, it's like the roundabouts, you know, when we first had them, people didn't know, but now people have learned. I think they'll get used to them, but, you know, you should close those parking lots at night. That makes a lot of sense. You know, we can't have people crashing through $10,000 gates. That doesn't make any sense. You know, having somebody wait up there for everybody to leave doesn't make sense because people don't leave when it gets dark. So I think you've come up with the best solution.
Yeah. And we'll keep working on it. It's an iterative plan. It'll grow.
And I would add, as far as going back to any direction we might offer regarding the plan that we'll see at the end of the year, I think it's really important that we look at a proactive public relations, public awareness education campaign. I mean, you touched on that, but I think we need to make sure that people understand. I mean, like I said earlier, it was an eye-opener for me. I thought, other than a few incidents, everything is okay up there, but
That's what we want
sounds like
everybody
it's
to
pretty
think.
complicated. And so I think the public somehow needs to know that, and what the collaborative efforts that are occurring, and what we're doing, why it's important to do some of the things that we're doing, It's not an overreaction. It's not excessive, but it's a way of building in efficiencies and ultimately ensuring public safety and ensuring that folks can enjoy the experience of being up there.
Yeah, and one of the things by doing this at the end of the year, it allows us time between our community relations specialists and public information officers to get information out to the public about, what is it we're trying to do and how are we going to accomplish that. So it doesn't catch folks completely off guard. So we can prepare for this quite well.
And the final thing from my part would be great if you could somehow cut off the climb on Monster Mountain, because when I do the Horsetooth Half, that's a bit of a killer.
That is. And we'll work on that.
I have a deputy's car nearby.
Lynette does that just fine, John.
What's that?
That runs up there just fine.
Yes, it does.
You're about the same size. But a couple of things I wanted to share on that line is, one, the park rangers have, over the last few years, saved a number of lives of people that there have been so many amazing stories of, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the last one that, I remember a couple of years ago, there were 3 or 4 helicopters came into South Bay in a 2-week period of time. The medical stuff wasn't it just a couple of months ago the lady had the heart attack? Was it a heart attack, I believe?
She had a blood clot that went from her leg up in her brain.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean the park rangers absolutely saved lives on the water and in the parks, and that's pretty amazing when you're able to do that. And as far as people being able to enjoy the parks, a couple of things that you guys have done, and Mark runs Horsetooth Reservoir like it's his own house and yard. I mean, it's amazing how much you know about that reservoir and the pride you take in it and all the improvements. I think it's like you're doing it for your own family. Your dedication to that park is just amazing. The things that have been done there that allow people to enjoy that park, because I walk over there at night a lot, maybe not as much as I should, but the picnic tables on the road that goes down to the swim beach, it's amazing that every one of those is full of families with young kids, and they're cooking out on the grills and enjoying a family time together that's really very reasonable in cost. And that is an amazing benefit to the community. And the shelter structure down there by South Beach is just used a lot. It's available for groups, to use that. There's just so few opportunities like that in our county, where a family or a church group or neighborhood group can use a facility like that. And the facilities there are fantastic. I mean, there's a grill there with a sink, and there's bathrooms, and there's showers, and there's changing places for people to use the beach. That's why there's so many people there, I think, because you've just created an outstanding destination for people to come to. But it's hard to measure those values that add value to families that are really inexpensive, because a lot of things are so expensive today, and so many families in Laramie County can't afford, to go to an amusement park or something like that. But it's a really good value. A day pass is, what, $8? $9 to get in there, and you can have a cookout with your family there, and you got a great facility.
You raised the fee.
What?
You raised the fee.
You didn't help? Okay. It is a good value, though, and it's a great location. It's because of our folks that made it that way.
Best is yet to come.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, great. Anything else?
Yes, Commissioners, we just wondered if you want to hear the annual report today, or if you want us to bring it back when we bring back the plan.
Annual report of what?
Mm-hmm. For the Horsetooth.
How long will it take? 15, 20?
We'll bring it back.
Come back. Okay.
Thank
Sounds like a
you.
good plan.
It is really good. I heard it at Parkport.
Very good. All right. Anything else? Do you guys have
We have
anything else?
Leslie.
Oh, Leslie wants to say something?
Yep.
Leslie,
Thank you.
we got a long night tonight, potentially.
Realize that, yes. So Leslie Ellis, Community Development Director. I do not have updates for you. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about what's coming this evening, this afternoon, or what have you. Laurie was going to jump in with something, and I'll tag team with her.
I was. Recently, we asked you to look at putting together a board related to the land use code updates. We discovered today that we had a miscommunication between myself and Leslie and Matt as to what that board was going to be used for and how it was going to come together. So it ended up being something we didn't intend for it to be, and we're withdrawing our request to have you even look at that board because we didn't intend to have a similar board like what we have for the Oil and Gas Commission. And Leslie's going to tell you how we're going to manage that going forward.
Yep, so I think,
No voting, they weren't going to vote on things, they were just a sounding board for advice, wasn't that correct?
that's correct. So I think, though, in light of concerns we've heard and some of the other issues that Laurie mentioned about potentially a miscommunication about the role of this group being more technical in nature and an advisory group to staff versus a group that would advise the commissioners, I think we'd like to suggest that we approach a different way, and that is, I think you saw in the engagement plan, we are anticipating a very broad and inclusive process. We want to make sure we touch on all the issues that matter to you all the most, and that we hear from the people who are going to help guide us in terms of process and procedures and the various issues in the code. I think our recommendation would be to assemble little focus groups from time to time as we hear from you about the issues that you think are most pertinent to address. Because really, what we want to do is make sure we hear from people about those technical topics. And I know you've mentioned a number of them. I mean, there are issues around housing, there are issues around process and procedures and streamlining, there are issues around agriculture and how to address, different types of agriculture and make for more opportunities in the county. I think there are issues around just commercial opportunity in the rural areas that we haven't had in the past. So there are a number of things that we know are important. I'm not sure if we're going to get at those issues in the best way by assembling a group of 15 people. So that would be our suggestion. Now, if you would like to continue on that path, of course, that is your prerogative. But I think just in light of some of the concerns and questions that we've been hearing, it may make sense to try to take more of an issues-based approach at this point.
Well, one advantage to that is I think you get better input if you're focused and you have it a little bit structured and it's say, okay, now we're going to talk about, X, and you can assemble people that are interested in that issue and you can introduce the issue a little bit rather than bringing people together and say, here's, the comp plan, here's our land use code, what do you think we should do? You're probably not going to get very focused advice. So what I like about what you've said, and I want to think about it, is, maybe we want to do a certain issue and invite people that are really experts and also people that are very interested in that particular issue. And it might be actually a more efficient use of their time if they get to talk about things that they're passionate about and interested and knowledgeable about.
So-
And we might get better input.
Yeah, so for instance, we just had a work session with our Ag Advisory Board members, right? And they're talking about how they need, really what they were talking about is they need manure from feedlots for all of these organic farms that we're having start to spring up.
Or
right here.
housing for workers.
Or,
We could talk about
or
that.
housing for work. They came in a different time and asked about that and talked about that. And so I think that what Steve and I guess Leslie are talking about could be very effective in helping inform our regulations on that front. But kind of everything in the kitchen sink approach doesn't seem particularly beneficial. I mean, even the Oil and Gas Task Force is really working on just regulations on one specific area. So this could actually kind of, when we had the horse boarding regulations working group, they worked on specifically on that one specific area.
That was easy because they were one trip.
Easy? You went 6 months over time.
I just wanted to get it in one trip.
It took you 6 months longer than you were supposed to take you, by the way.
The commissioners would have liked the first solution.
Well, you should have brought a good solution. I'm going to have to fix it then. Okay, that sounds like a good idea. Yeah, John.
Yeah,
go ahead.
thanks. So just to make sure I understand, Liz, and I agree, we'll go down this different path. But for at least the two people that I reached out to who did express some interest in participating, is the message that I should convey to them is that we're going to take a different approach. We're not going to form this all-encompassing advisory committee, but that we'll keep their names and their contact information.
Yeah.
And let's say when we get to talking more about housing, we would maybe invite that person to participate in that focus area or that sort of thing. Is that the message?
I think that makes sense. And that would go for all of you three commissioners if you have particular people that you'd like us to make sure we make contact with at various stages or related to certain issues. Send those names to us, and then we'll make sure that we reach out to them when we're talking about a particular topic.
And great, that helps, and I will communicate that, work with you folks to make sure you have the contact information for future reference. The last thing I wish to bring up, if I may, Mr. Chair, regarding this afternoon, the land use hearing at 3 o'clock, I had a question on the item number 2, I think it is, the firehouse self-storage matter. My question is, yes, that is correct. In the review agency comments, it indicates that Katie from the Laramie County Engineering Department provided no specific comments regarding the appeal, and yet if you turn to page 17 of our packet, there's about a 3 or 4 page document with very specific comments. And even at the end, she suggests the engineering department cannot recommend approval of this until all this stuff has been addressed. So that's my question. How come it says no comments, and yet there seems to be 3 pages of comments?
So let me carry that back to Rob,
course.
and we can address it at the hearing, and if that means that you'd
So
like
then
to.
you'll know,
Yes.
and then John can ask this question again.
Yes,
And see
yeah,
what's,
that's
And it's not
helpful.
my intent to take anything off the consent,
Unless you
but,
need to, right.
Yeah.
but I
Right.
can ask a question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's,
absolutely,
it's a good
absolutely.
question, and I'll carry it to Rob, make sure he's prepared, and then if that means that you need to take a different direction or add some conditions to reflect that, we can work with you on that.
Okay.
So tonight, are we having a sign-up list, or are we expecting?
Yes, so, yep, so tonight, we will have a sign-up list. We'll have a Google document so that Commissioner Donley, Tom, you'll have access to that so you can see all the names in order. We are expecting one group of 5 people who are combining their time to do a 15-minute presentation, so 3 minutes each. We've tended to have 20 or so people who show up pretty regularly on this topic, so we may see that again, probably. So we'll have the sign-up sheet, you'll have that, we'll have that, we can help you manage the timing and that sort of thing. We're planning to do a presentation, answer questions, hear the testimony. If you have further questions after that, we can address that, and then seek your decision at that point.
3 minutes each, is that what people have been told?
Is that,
I guess. I mean, that kind of, we talked to Nancy Eason about the, kind of that group presentation, and that, kind of what I told her was we thought
yeah.
we'd have an expectation of about 3 minutes of public comment per person, and they had a 15-minute presentation, so.
And it may be that if they feel like they've got all the topics covered in that, then they won't, others won't feel
Fewer
the
people
need
will
to
need to
stand up,
speak.
but,
It doesn't typically the other way. Yeah,
Yeah.
the ones who donated their time then get up and speak too. They
Yeah.
usually do that, but,
so.
oh well.
So we'll help you with that, but we'll communicate 3 minutes unless there's a really big crowd, and then
Maybe
you know,
we'll
of
go
course,
to-
have the prerogative, you could say 2 minutes if you
Yep,
chose.
absolutely.
And isn't it correct, Leslie, that our options are to approve what the Planning Commission recommended, to make some changes to that perhaps, or possibly continue it because we need to figure things out or something?
Or vote no?
Or vote no, right,
Or vote no.
right.
Yeah.
Or vote no.
Yes, no, or table.
Oh.
And you saw from the minutes, the Planning Commission, I think they made our job a little bit easy in that they deliberated. They gave us a nice concise list of things to change or add. We included those where it made sense to do so. I'll explain all of that tonight. And so that's what you're looking at, is basically a combined staff and Planning Commission recommendation. And then it's really up to you if you think there's some things that you'd like to further change.
Because addendum 11 includes all of that, right? Isn't that correct? Because there was well, we don't need to get into it. We'll figure it out, but yeah.
Okay.
All right. So we'll see you in a bit. Thank you.
Intending to kill herself.
Smith says, I wanted to end my own life so bad and was in my car ready to go down that ramp into the water.
And she sat at the top of the ramp and she started to go down and stopped and went